Hello and welcome to the Healthy Dram. This is a channel where we discuss a health topic and a whiskey because these are two passions of mine. My name is Chris Prater. I am a med-peds primary care physician, which means I'm an adult doctor and a pediatrician. So today we're going to be talking about measles and Auchentoshan 3-wood. If that seems interesting to you, if you're wondering how they're related, stick around to find out. Let's go. So, measles makes headlines every year, and in the United States, there's been a rise in cases over the spring of 2024. And sadly, to our neighbors up north, there was a child in Canada killed by measles just recently. So I thought it appropriate to discuss measles. Measles is an acute respiratory virus. It is highly contagious. It is one of the most contagious viruses in human history. It causes cold-like symptoms followed by a rash. And so the cold-like symptoms include cough, congestion, conjunctivitis, which is pink eye, fever, and then the rash. And the contagious period is about a week. So it's a few days before the rash and then a few days after the rash. And while most children recover fully from the measles, and most adults if they contract measles, there are some that get complications. Complications can include pneumonia or encephalitis. And encephalitis is as bad as it sounds. It is when the virus spreads to the brain and it can cause permanent brain damage. And unfortunately, it doesn't stop there because measles can cause death, often related to those complications I just mentioned. And that happens between 1 in 500 and 1 in 1,000 cases. Before the measles vaccine was licensed, which happened in 1963, there was an average of 2 to 4 million measles cases every year. In addition, 48,000 people were hospitalized from measles, and 1,000 people developed chronic disability every year. And that was typically from acute encephalitis. Measles is entirely preventable. We have a vaccine for it. So in the United States, we have a measles vaccine, but many children and many adults get what's called an MMR, measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, which includes protection against those three viruses. So as you can see from the graph, the vaccine significantly decreased cases. So the vaccine was developed, licensed, and implemented in 1963, and cases dramatically began to fall. Then there was a slight increase in the late 80s. And so what happened then was that then another dose, a second dose, was recommended. So now, as the current schedule stands, 2 doses of the MMR vaccine are recommended. So since 2000, the annual number of cases has ranged from a low of 37 to a high of 1,282, which occurred in 2019. These numbers are dramatically lower than what they used to be. They still are not zero or close to zero, so we still get cases. Those cases are almost entirely from unvaccinated individuals. The vaccine has proven to be very effective. So again, after the 2-dose implementation, the vaccine effective protection rate is 97%. So what that means is if we had 100 individuals that were vaccinated with 2 doses, and we exposed them all to the virus, 97% would be totally fine and safe and not develop measles. 3%, however, would develop measles. So it's not 100% effective, but it is quite good for a vaccine. So why wouldn't you get the measles vaccine? Why wouldn't you recommend it for your children? Well, that is where we start to talk about vaccine hesitancy. So the measles vaccine, in particular the MMR vaccine, has a nasty rumor circulating about it. And that is because there have been false claims that the MMR vaccine can cause autism. And that false claim is the unfortunate result of Andrew Wakefield. This guy. So, this guy, Andrew Wakefield, and I'm going to quote Wikipedia because it so perfectly tells the sad truth. In its opening statement, Andrew Wakefield is a British fraudster, discredited academic, anti vaccine activist, and former physician. All of those statements true. Let's talk briefly about that. Andrew Wakefield developed a study and published a paper in The Lancet, a British medical journal, perhaps the most well known medical journal in the world. This paper claimed that there was a link between the MMR vaccine and autism. We found that there were a lot of flaws with this paper and this research. So, first of all, the patients that were selected, there were a lot of dubious ways of recruiting patients. So, one of the things, and this is true, he admitted it, he purchased blood samples from children at his son's birthday party that were then enlisted in the study. And it doesn't stop there. The way that the data was interpreted was very much flawed, and even the accuracy of the data had been questioned, and likely that he made up a lot of the data. This was never admitted. But one of the things that was admitted, which is also very dubious, is that he made a lot of money from attorneys who at that time were building cases with parents that were trying to claim that MMR caused autism in their children. So that is a huge conflict of interest. So he had a lot of motivation, bad motivation, to produce a paper that proves that link. And he was being given a lot of money to try to make that proof. So after all of this, there were several large studies, in fact, 9 of them, that tried to reproduce this data that Andrew Wakefield had. None of them could prove a link between the MMR vaccine and autism, which effectively disproves that theory. That paper that was published in 1998 was eventually retracted, and in addition, he was stripped of his medical license. So I don't want to talk about him anymore, but I do want to talk about Paul Offit. Now, Paul Offit is a physician, a researcher, an awesome human being, basically a superhero. And he wrote a book called Autism's False Prophets. And if you want to learn more about this, you should definitely check it out. And if you want a slightly slimmer version, then you can check out the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia website that I will link below. And that will give you at least a bit more details as to why this paper, why this scientific study was flawed. So that is all that I have to say about measles today. We have a vaccine that is very effective and safe that prevents a potentially deadly illness. I encourage you to look up the data yourself, ask your physician, get recommended vaccines, which includes the MMR vaccine. So let's transition now to our whiskey of the day, and that is Auchentoshan 3-wood. So where is the measles link? I am so excited to share with you. So remember that the vaccine for measles was licensed in 1963. Auchentoshan is owned by Suntory, a multinational beverage corporation. And in 1963, the former Kotobukiya company changed its name to Suntory. So there is your link. Now, you probably know Suntory. You probably have had some of their beverages. I will mention some of them. I'll put a fun picture up here that shows some of them. They are huge in the beverage industry. They produce things such as Orangina, Schweppes, Midori melon liquor, Cruzan rum, bourbons such as Jim Beam and Knob Creek, Japanese whiskeys like Hibiki and Yamakaze, and Scotch whiskeys like this one right here, Ardmore, Bowmore, Lefroy, they are, as I mentioned, huge. So, fun fact, Suntory is a combination of sun plus the name of its founder, Shinjiro Tori. So why the sun part? So sun comes from the Japanese word akadama, and that was the name of a port that they were selling at the time, which literally means red ball. And so that's kind of like the sun. Red ball, Tori. That's pretty cool. The Auchentoshan distillery was founded in 1823 and it was bought by Suntory in 1994. It is from the lowlands, so this is a lowland whiskey. And I'm going to show a map here of the lowlands, which is a very fascinating area. So it's the farthest south in Scotland, and it includes two of the larger cities, which includes Glasgow, where Auchentoshan is near, and Edinburgh. And despite being a hub of big cities, it actually doesn't have a lot of distilleries when you compare it to other, even smaller regions of Scotland. So the Auchentoshan distillery is known for triple distilling their whiskies, which is not common in Scotch whiskey. And so it achieves a higher alcohol by volume because it's triple distilled, up to 81%. Then, unfortunately, it is watered down, and so the 3 wood is bottled at 43%. Now, the 3 wood is the 3 casks that it is aged in, and while it is a no age statement, it is about 12 years, so it spends about 10 years in ex-bourbon casks before then spending about a year each in Oloroso and then PX sherry casks. Let's get on to the tasting notes. So on the nose, it's a big, bold nose. You can smell the sherry influence. You can smell the bourbon influence. You get some dark fruits like plums and black currants. You get a little bit of cinnamon and spice. On the palate, you get much of the same. There is really a lot of dark fruits in here. There are plums and black currants and raisins. There is the influence from the bourbon cask. There's butterscotch. It is a fun, smooth whiskey. It is enjoyable. It doesn't have a long finish because probably it's 43%, but it has a bold flavor. This is a whiskey that I think a lot of bourbon enthusiasts would like. It does have a lot of the similar flavors, and I think that it would be a good one to give to someone that might not be a whiskey fan at all. So this is a very approachable Scotch whiskey. I will say that this is probably not my favorite lowland whiskey. It is a good one, but I would say that that award probably goes to Bladnoch, which I guess we'll have to talk about someday. And so check that distillery out if you are enjoying Auchentoshan. If you're just getting into Scotch whiskey and want to explore another lowland distillery. But that's all I have to say about Auchentoshan today. That's all I have to say about measles. And I hope that you enjoyed this information. I enjoyed sharing it with you. Whiskey and health, that is meant to be shared so that we can enhance our knowledge and enhance our life experience. So until next time, salute.